I don't think I realized how much I legitimately love The Office until I rewatched it recently this week. I decided to rewatch it, one, because I was out of stuff to watch and you can't be alone with the thoughts. That's just not going to end up well for anybody. But more to the point, I rewatched it because of The Paper. What is The Paper? People have been asking me as I've been talking about it a lot in the past few weeks. Well, The Paper is a spinoff of The Office. But rewatching The Office, I was like, oh, no. I liked it. I've always liked it, but I was like, oh, no. This is like top 10 sitcom, really. And it is pretty firmly anchored by one of the true great portrayals in TV history, that of Steve Carell, who both manages to make Michael uniquely lovable and uniquely hateable at once, which is a incredibly hard and difficult and trying to contrive it, that's what she said joke. But it is very difficult. So it leaves a big gap with the potential spinoff, which is a spinoff, but it's a strange way of doing it, and it's kind of an interesting way of doing it. So, how is The Office a spinoff? Well, we learn that in the intervening years, Dunder Mifflin has been bought out by a bigger conglomerate in Toledo. And we learn that it is a massive paper conglomerate that owns numerous things, including a local newspaper named the Toledo Truth Teller. And seemingly the only real reason they bought the Toledo Truth Teller is that it was the building. They wanted the building and they begrudgingly let the paper stick around. But the Toledo Truth Teller has, let's say, seen better days and has fallen into all of the problems that a modern day newspaper has fallen into, which is basically just doing AP wire news sources. I guess I should subscribe to the AP News and just uses several of their stories without really creating its own, and clickbait, affiliate marketing ads. And that's where we meet our new main character. It is played by a wonderful actor, Donald Gleason, who is notable for being one of the many very good actors that the Star Wars sequels, in retrospect, totally wasted. He's also the son of Brendan Gleeson, who is, in my opinion, one of the great actors of ever. Also terribly afraid. I did look up very deliberately how to pronounce his first name, and now I'm very nervous I mispronounced his last name. Anyway, so this is the first kind of new addition. And the question in any boss character in an Office-like show is how Michael they're going to be. And the answer is surprisingly not. Ned is a true blue believer in journalism, old school facts journalism, gumshoe leather, working long hours into the night, and says very poignantly that his hero was actually Clark Kent and not Superman. And the honest answer is he's kind of essentially the halfway point between a Ben Wyatt and a Michael Scott. Now, I am of the opinion that Ben Wyatt is one of the great sitcom characters of all time, so this is a very pleasant, and Gleason plays him with a very infectious energy that you're like, oh no, damn it, I want this to work out. And this is one of the first things that really differentiates The Office, I would say. The paper from The Office is that there is actually quite a bit of tension, as the Toledo Truth Teller is a side afterthought, and their attempts to actually turn it into a real newspaper again is constantly met with obfuscations from corporate and from entrenched parties. And this is where we get a kind of unique premise to the show, in that instead of hiring a staff, which Ned really wants, he has to rely on volunteer journalists. mostly from other departments in the megacorp that the Toledo Truth Teller is part of. And this is where you get the distinct feeling that in many ways this is sort of the halfway point between Parks and Recreation and The Office. It is about an enthusiastic, true blue believer in a institution that people are often quite cynical about, and attempting to inject a very positive energy, but we also get corporate malfeasance and incompetent leaders who are more interested in money. And you can really actually feel a lot of the Parks and Recreation influence in this, to the point that at times Ned also feels a lot like Leslie Knope, who I also consider one of the great characters. But with the more cynical edge of something like The Office, which was always much more cynical than Parks and Recreation, I would argue. It does, in my opinion, have an infectious energy that it makes it really hard to hate, I would say. Because the central arc is so strong of attempting to be a real newspaper again after years being stuck in clickbait, it has a more plot-driven drive than something like The Office did, which was much more episodic usually. There were arcs in The Office, but not to the sense of an obvious follow-through. So one thing I always think about is that a lot. That'll be cut out, but I do say it a lot. I can hear myself saying it. Is that streamers have actually had a lot of trouble, I would say, with sitcoms. Because sitcoms live really well in episodic storytelling. A sitcom usually struggles, I would say, with the rigors of a streamer schedule that really likes consistent plot-driven stories. You often hear people say that, their TV show isn't a TV show. It's a 10-hour movie with breaks. And I like that the paper is definitively a TV show. It is a more plot-driven TV show. Not that it is a show that every episode is a cliffhanger ending. I'm just saying that there is this really consistent arc through line of the characters slowly becoming real journalists. And that's one of those really fun things, because they're all just volunteers who are trying their hand at journalism because there is no money and he just needed whoever they could get. It is a delight to see them slowly but surely develop into... They're not there yet, but the character arcs are clear that they are beginning to sharpen their instincts. And that's a really beautiful thing. I really like it when sitcoms have a good sense of character progression, but that's not the big question. I think a lot of people who are watching this, who are primed to watch this, are curious about moniker an Office spinoff. So Oscar is in this show. It is the same character. They make veiled references to Michael a few times. And I don't want to just sit here and go like, oh, this is a funny joke, but I'm going to say one funny joke I found really funny. When Oscar sees the documentary crew, and it's established that the documentary crew is the same crew. And when he sees the documentary crew again, he yells out loudly, "I don't consent! You can't use my image, likeness, or name." And there is a text thing that pops up that says, "This is not true. There was no end date on Oscar's image release that he signed." One thing that's actually really nice is that they seem to clearly be having a little bit more fun with the mockumentary concept. As The Office went on, they clearly lost that. It came back later when people reminded them that this is technically a documentary being filmed. But it's nice that there's a lot more actual playing with this idea that it is just a documentary being filmed. And they do make justifications for that. And even in one scene that's quite funny, a couple of the characters mute their mics and we can just hear the crew chatting about people that they're dating. The supporting cast is very strong, and it's buoyed by Oscar being there. And it's interesting that he really slips back almost immediately into those rhythms of playing Oscar. A well-developed character really feels like he's never left. And it is actually uniquely weird because I had just watched The Office, and to hear the rhythms of his performance in a new place it's odd, I guess. It's odd. It feels weird to see this character in a totally different setting interacting with totally different characters, because you're like, but I know you from one place. What are you doing in this whole new place? But it works surprisingly well. And this is a really interesting thing about this being a spinoff, because it is a spinoff, but it's a new type of spinoff, I would argue. Spinoff in the way they do comic books as spinoffs. Very accurately, to me at least, this feels like what they do in team-up books for comic books, where they take a few disparate heroes that aren't really being used in other books and put them together to see if sparks fly and to see if they can bring some of these heroes back into the limelight. And I guess this really goes to show you how thoroughly more mainstream modern entertainment has very thoroughly adapted to the new reality that comic books were cool and were always cool and they're the best in the world, and it's not dorky to like superheroes. And this is also a strange feeling, because usually when spin-offs happen, usually the character that is being spun off is the main character of the new show, but Oscar is very much part of the ensemble. I would argue a like more prominent part of the ensemble, but very much still part of the ensemble. And it is a unique show. And I wonder if this is probably going to be the way spin-offs might happen in the future, in that you take a character from one show and add them into the mix of a new show that you were already working on. Because one of the things that I think is interesting, it actually kind of makes sense that Oscar is there, because I imagine the backstory is, and this didn't happen, this is just me purely fan speculating about what may have happened, is that when Dunder Mifflin got bought out, Oscar just stayed, and that's how he's kind of ended up in Toledo. And there's a few, the rest of the characters are uniquely charming, uniquely lovely. Actually, it was really, what sitcoms do so well is they make you really care about the characters almost immediately. And I would say it took me about 3 episodes to lock into these characters. Like, oh, I'm following them. This is the story I want. And it's a really nice feeling that they are underdogs who are trying very hard to rise against a system that sucks. So yeah, I ended up really liking the show. I was primed to like it, though. I was primed to enjoy something like this. I like these shows. I've always liked these types of shows. I know that's like a super duper normie opinion, but I do. And we've been struggling, I think, in sitcoms, and I've been nervous about them existing lately. Because the only ones that I can think of that really rose to the top lately have been like St. Abbott's Elementary and like Abbott's Elementary. I'm combining it with St. Denis Medical. I've seen Abbott Elementary. I have not seen St. Denis. That might be a fun show, but it is hard and kind of sad to think that we haven't been getting a couple of really great sitcoms. A genre that is weirdly troubled at the moment, even though that has been the foundation of episodic TV-based storytelling forever. The sitcoms have always existed. And this goes to a broader point, I think, in that what do you define as a drama and a comedy anymore? This is something I was really thinking about lately. I always think it is a crime that a true comedy has never really won the Oscar for Best Picture. But it's getting hard to define exactly where comedy stops and where drama begins. Because it's like, how do you necessarily define what a funny drama is, or a comedy that has dramatic parts to it? I think about this in like something like The Social Network, which was noted for its really witty and dialogue, and it won the Oscar. And it's like, that's a drama, but part of the reason why it won the Oscar was because it had really good witty one-liners, which is an Aaron Sorkin thing. And also part of the reason why it won the Oscar is because Aaron Sorkin had not won the Oscar. And what we see is this really kind of merging of genres in a lot of ways. To me, it's not surprising that some of the most overt comedic movies are superhero movies. You kind of get in like genre now in movies, mostly a sampler. Like something like The Naked Gun flopping, I think, is a little bit of a bummer. But it's hard to get like complete one genre or the another. And it seems that people really like altogether. It's like an ideal like thing is like a genre mashup show. Anyway. And it's nice to see a sitcom that can very successfully navigate the waters of a modern day world, seemingly so effortlessly, in that it does everything it needs to do as a streaming show, but it also does everything it needs to do as a sitcom. Now, if I could give a piece of advice, I guess, about how to watch something like this, and this is something I've been wanting to say for a while. The Office is a really beloved show. I have very fond memories of it as a young person growing up. And I know there are a lot of people out there who look to it as a very comfortable show. And I see nothing wrong with that. But if I could, and this is just a general thing I've noticed, shows can't fix you. Like, you're still you at the end of the day. And something like with these big genre reboots and stuff is that at the end of the day, you can have a really fun time with them. It can be really good, but it won't take you back to that place where you saw the original. And I know it's hard, and I know part of what they're pitching this as is an Office spinoff. But I just appreciate, and I don't think it's totally unfair to go into it, especially since it is directly connected to the original show. But go into it as a show that you're hoping to find funny, not a show that you're hoping will bring you back to that place you were in when you first saw The Office. At the end of the day, no matter how great a show is, eventually you have to come back to reality and be you. A show can't suddenly repair your entire life. That's a bummer. I'm sorry, but I wanted to say that. I felt that was needed to be said. So check it out. I watched all the episodes. I really did. And I found it immensely charming. Thank you for indulging me. I really appreciate that. Like and subscribe. Ugh, I feel guilty saying that, but it would be nice. I don't know. Just this is cheesy, but it's like subscribe. Yeah, that's good for me, but doesn't help you in any way. I don't know. Do something you enjoy. Go outside and find like a beetle and just watch it for hours. That shit's rad, man.